I wanted to kind of discuss is maybe some of the circumstances that are known right now, and of course the investigation is still going about the the crash itself and what is known at this point about the crash. The weather was completely jacked up. It was extremely foggy, is what all the reports have indicated. So foggy, in fact, that the LAPD that same day had grounded their own helicopters.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure, if the LAPD, who they routinely have helicopters in the air just for patrol, are saying, "Hey, we're not gonna do that right now." What on earth? I mean, the pilot he was an older gentleman. He was experienced. He's done this before. I don't know. You said you're a pilot, Mike. What's your thoughts on something like that? You have a lot of instruments to guide you. I get that, but
Yeah,
damn.
but it's one of those things to where like when the police and pretty much they were saying like, dude, don't fly, and the conditions were only getting worse, and you're looking at okay, like what was he doing? He was going to a charity. His Mamba, his Black Mamba.
His daughter had a basketball game, I believe it was, or something. He
Yeah,
coached in.
yeah, and so it's just kind of like. You know what? I don't know. You got like all right, more details have to come out, right?
I mean, hindsight's 2020. I get it.
Yeah, it's just like there's. I mean, I think with a lot of them we the Davy Allison's ones. I mean, there's a lot where it's more mechanical issues that just kind of happen.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever it's like preventable, I remember as a pilot. I can't remember the exact percentage, but I remember my flight instructor was telling me like 90% of all air accidents are preventable. It's usually that you didn't pick up on something in a pre-flight. It's pilot error, instrumentation error, flying conditions you shouldn't, maybe not paying attention to something, bad maintenance, not keeping up with it. I mean, and so whenever I think, and that's why I think a lot of times, once again with the exception of Boeing, apparently, usually the same things don't happen twice, is because it was preventable. They figure out what it was and it doesn't happen again. But this one, it was just like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's what happened to John F. Kennedy Jr. It was just flying in conditions he was not rated to fly in, and it was catastrophic. That's the thing with flying. It's just so, I can't stress enough how flying is amazing. It's fun, I wish I want to go back. I need to get back in flying a lot more. But it's so dangerous. It is so serious. Where that's what makes it so scary as a young pilot. I remember the first time I was soloing, and a lot of times you're at 15, 20 hours of logged flight hours before you're even soloing for the first time. I remember getting to the hangars and pilot just going, hey, man, like flight instructor, all right, man, you got this. So I'll be in the hangars listening in, just go and do some touch and goes. I'm like, are you sure?
Yeah, I'm qualified for this?
I mean, scared shitless. I'm talking like covered in sweat, death grip on the yoke, and just like, because you realize how
serious it is.
How serious it is. You can't fuck around. And I want to hear what was said. I want to hear what kind of happened, because you don't really know what to believe. But if it was because of fog, and you see a lot of times with these wealthy people where they will put pressure on the pilots to do it, and it's like if that's what it is, that is the biggest tragedy of it all, is that it was unnecessary.
Well, and some people have speculated, as they tend to do in these things, that it was the pilot for hire. I don't think they've released that yet. Was he maybe feeling pressure to, get the people where they wanted to go? I don't know if he's.
I gotta look at once again. I gotta look at
Not that I thought that anybody on board was like, no, you need to do it. Like obviously the pilot knows best. But maybe he put the pressure on himself and was like, hey, listen. I need to do this, or
honestly, I mean, usually how these things work. I mean, and it was a helicopter, but I mean, my expertise is more airplanes. But usually, how it is, you got these private helicopter companies. The pilots are staff pilots, right? And so they're obviously. I mean, if you're flying for these companies, you're a great pilot. Like you don't get into these companies without being an amazing pilot, right? So the fact that. If you're working with high net worth, very high profile clients, there's always been that issue of when push comes to shove, they have to get to that meeting. If let's say they go, if I'm at this proxy meeting, they're going to outvote me. You got to find a way of landing the plane, right? And it's like, what are they going to do?
Well, what are the? They have a timeline here of what has happened.
Yeah,
and I just want to go over that real quick here. And this just came out. And again, this is still ongoing, so I'm sure this is going to change as the days and weeks come on. But they have. Let me see if I can find it here. I had it.
Yeah, it's just.
Oh, here it is, right here. Sorry, I'm reading so many things about it. I'm just trying to keep everything straight here because you want to try to have as much accurate information. And again, there's a lot of speculation as it's going to happen.
That's the thing.
I mean,
Yeah.
people are going to talk about. We're going to talk about it. I mean, this is it is what it is. All right, so they have a minute by minute. Come on.
Gotta love technical difficulties, right?
Well, it's not even that. It's just I keep getting these pop-ups about advertisements of this and that and other. I'm like, okay, that's fantastic, but can you just let me read what I'm trying to read here? Okay, so all right, 9:06 a.m. The flight departs Orange County. They were at John Wayne Airport, which is actually I've been to a couple times. That's at 9:06. It takes off. At 9:17 a.m., they take a detour. The route diverges from the typical path here, according to the map. And then at 9:21 a.m., they were circling. The air traffic control tells the pilot to circle to avoid other aircraft in the area. And at 9:39 a.m., they get the go-ahead. The Van Nuys Airport approves a turn towards the 101 freeway. And then just a few minutes later, 9:44 a.m., a tower says the aircraft is too low to receive guidance. And then just 1 minute later at 9:45, the crash happens and the helicopter crashes on a hillside in Calabasas. Now, one of the witnesses who, and it was more of just someone who had heard something, because the fog was so dense that he said he heard, what he thought was the engine was sputtering or struggling, but he couldn't see anything until the very last minute that the helicopter coming down, the witness, and he said he saw it hit, and then it burst into a fireball.
Yeah.
Is what it did, but he couldn't see. That's how thick the fog was.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But he said, according to the eyewitness, the ear witness, it sounded to him that there was some engine trouble, but he might not know. Maybe he was trying to. Other people said that the pilot was trying to land, and due to the fog, he couldn't see because it was on like a mountain hillside thing. But
Yeah, you gotta look at me like there's a lot of different reports coming out. And I knew we'd be talking about. Yeah, it's still early.
They said there is no black box in that helicopter, and there was no distress calls prior to the crash.
Yeah.
So I don't know that they're ever going to find a definitive answer.
Yeah, well, I think you have to kind of look at all the different factors involved. So I think the ones that we do know, we know the flight data, at least the tracking data. Mm-hmm. We do know it was very erratic. All right. Whenever you see erratic flight patterns, that always gives the inclination that you're lost, right? Because flying, like you have to look at with flying, it's called and it's called VFR, visual flight referencing, and then you have instrument flight rate, IFR conditions. IFR is you can't see anything; you're flying solely by your instruments. Okay, you have to look at with helicopters a little bit different. It's not like you're landing at an airport where you have instrumentation that they have. It's called an ILS or it's like a glide scope where it can bring you in almost like 100 feet above the ground. I mean, it will literally. It's like a little T, and so if it's lined up. Like a T, you're on line with the runway. If you're right kind of in the middle, exactly you're right on glide path. So you just kind of keep it in the middle and it'll just kind of keep lowering you in. You don't get that when you're landing in the middle of anywhere. You can land a helicopter anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have the instrumentation to land that you normally would with, an airplane. So whenever you see erratic flight patterns, whenever you see fog conditions, and what the eyewitness reports is that the plane was actually circling for about 15 minutes. And you can't go off of what people were hearing because the majority of people are saying they didn't hear any issues. I think you only had a couple eyewitnesses.
Well, plus,
you have canyons.
Are they helicopter engine experts?
Exactly. So you have helicopters, but not only that, you have canyons. You have fog, which reverberates the sound differently. It bounces off the canyons a lot differently. Helicopters just have a certain sound to it. So I don't think there's going to be any mechanical issues. I think what's going to end up happening is that I think what happened is that they probably ran out of gas. Not necessarily they ran out of gas. Was that they were forced to land because they had nowhere else to go. I think they probably realized like they had to put it down. I think the pilot tried putting it down and he just You know, it's a and he slammed that fucking thing into the ground, and so he didn't see where it was, and I think he was forced to have to land because I don't think they're anywhere near really where they were supposed to be. So I think that's what will come out, and it's preventable. That's the sad thing. And 9 people died,
Yeah.
and was there pressure on the pilot to fly? Probably, because I think any decent pilot would look at that going, you know what, let's just wait till the fog clears.
Well, they're saying here that, again, this is according to the LA Times,
Yeah.
that there was a climb before a rapid descent into the elevated terrain. At one point in time, looks like they were at 2,200 feet or so, and then just right before the crash, and then they quickly descended down. Again, not sure if that indicates some kind of mechanical failure or emergency. Again, there is no black box, they said, on board, and there was no distress call made. So whatever happened, either they didn't know that they were in distress, or it happened so quickly.
Well, that's
Probably will never know.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in a situation, I've only been in like one situation when I was in crisis where I was a solo pilot. I was actually before I even had a license, and I got boxed in by a storm. It is in Ohio in the summertime. Storms convect out of nowhere. I got lost, like I literally, because I had to take evasive action, so my plane didn't get fucking ripped to shreds, pretty much. And I remember like trying to sit there and radio, figure out where you're at, go through everything, and there's a lot going on. And yeah, but I'm willing to bet it's just going to be it all come down to weather, pilot decision to fly, and I think really the question is going to be, why did this pilot take off in those conditions?